All right, here we are. And I want to thank you for joining us today for our first Artists Exchange event. We hope you brought your lunch and you're ready to dive in to talk about art. I'm Shelley Rugg. I'm the gallery coordinator at Gallery 1. And for our presentation today, we ask that you please stay muted unless you are asked to unmute. And for your best viewing, you can select speaker view from the top right-hand corner of the Zoom viewing screen. But you can always hop back to gallery anytime if you want to see everybody. We want you to know that we are recording today's presentation for future viewing on our website and our YouTube channel. So each month we will welcome 3 artists to share their work for feedback, and at the end we will open the floor for sharing of opportunities, ideas, and resources. My co-host today, let me spotlight myself. My co-host today is Pamela Blotner. You want to wave, Pamela? Okay. And for this first event, the 2 of us will be sharing our work, and we will also be joined by artist Ernesto Sanchez. And now I will pass it to Pamela.
Okay, I thank you so much for coming. I think this is really exciting and will probably be a little awkward, so smile whenever you can. I have the pleasure of introducing both of my cohorts here. And first, I'm going to introduce Shelley Rudd, whom many of you know as the gallery coordinator at GRO. Maybe you might not know that she's also a painter and a performance artist and a Renaissance person, as is Ernesto. Shelley lives in Inverness, and her visual artwork is primarily about color, which you'll see instantly, whether she's painting a portrait or her latest fascination, the branches of trees. As her work moves into performance, she's also interested in bold statements that arouse curiosity and cause the viewer to think. Her current work explores the impact of color and the visual hum that color can bring. Take it away, Shelley.
All right, thank you so much, Pamela. And I'm going to allow myself about 5 minutes here to share some of my work with you. And so I'm going to come back to these pieces, which are my most current body of work. And I just want to give you a quick tour of my studio so you can see some other pieces. This is also part of the series, some smaller studies and a couple of iconic heads that I've painted. Over here, I've got a portrait commission in progress. And still working on that, little fine finishing touches. And little stack of my old charcoal drawings. And up here, this paper mache head is the last remaining relic I have from when I represented every parade in Long Beach for 2 years, represented the arts. Here's a couple of charcoal portraits. Some of you may or may not know Sim Vanderen. And so I think that's enough of the look at the studio. And then this series started really with this painting here. As I was driving down the road, I saw this bird sitting in a branch with the sky blasted out beyond the branches, and painted it, you know, pretty simply. Underneath all that, what looks like white is a lot of color that was initially put on in a very random, loose, bold fashion. And so when you're up close to the painting, you can start to see some of the underlying color. that is beneath. And then I continued the tree series, and I started to expand the background into explorations of color in different ways. And they still have a lot of alternative color underneath the color that you see in the end. And then, you know, thinking about different ways to approach filling in that background color. And this piece ended up having a kind of mosaic-like effect. Because I was applying the color in a more random way, not necessarily trying to create a gradation. And then this piece really working with the color orange. And down here, focusing on purple. And underneath that purple, there's green. And so you can kind of see a little of it coming through. And so that's kind of an overview of the most current body of work. And then recently I thought I would play around with just making marks. And so this piece was just a random exploration of marks. And then I personally am disappointed in the circles that I put on top, but it was an experiment. And so I'm glad that I tried that, but now I know I'm not in love with it. I think I liked the piece better before I did that. But that's, you know, experiment. This piece here began as a drawing of a magnolia branch, and you can see the magnolia branch coming through here. But at the time that I painted it, I decided that it wasn't any good, and I just put it aside and started over on a different surface. So I picked this up the other day, and I decided just to riff on the line of the branch and the shapes of the buds on the magnolia blossoms, and letting them become sort of abstract shapes, and then playing with that, and really randomizing a little bit with the color. And so a little different, but still working with some of the same ideas. And that is my time. My time is up. So that means if anyone would like to ask any questions or give any feedback, this is the time to do that.
Shelley, I have a question.
So, yes, Ernesto.
What is the surface that you have on the paintings, that series of trees behind you? It almost looks like those metal prints. It has such a glossy, reflective quality about it.
I'm painting on wood, so it has a very flat, hard surface. And then I finish with a gloss varnish, because it just makes me happy to see the paint look all shiny. And it just seems to make the colors really, really pop and look fresher when I add the varnish. So I've really been happy with that.
Yeah, it looks good.
Thank you.
I have a question, Shelley. Oh.
Hi, Claire. Yes.
Hi, Shelley. Are the trees painted from in situ, where you're actually out there by one of those plants drawing it, or from your imagination, or a photograph, or a combination?
Thanks for the question. That's really great. Actually, the images all began from a photograph, and you know, we all have our handy dandy phones in our pockets. So whenever the spirit moves me, I can whip it out and shoot a picture. And then I take it home and I use it as reference. And so, so the way I make these paintings is I start off just laying down some really bold color like magentas and turquoise and orange and just really, really strong color. Sometimes I think, oh, this might be a cloud and maybe I'll put a little white or, you know, I'll play around with that in a really loose way. Then I go and meticulously try to follow every little branch. And you can see in this piece here, there's just so many little pieces that come off of each of the large branches. And I just found it fascinating to try and really see all of those little tiny details. But at the same time, I found that I would get lost in the tangle of branches and get a little confused. And so I allowed myself the freedom to make the lines go where I felt they needed to go if that happened. And then once I've gone through that meticulous process of really looking and seeing those branches, then for me, the more fun part of really popping in the color all around the branches in the background, and it becomes the more play part of the experience for me, where I can really start to explore how I want the color to move across that surface. And so I have like this piece here that the color changes are a little more obvious and less natural gradation of flow, but you know, it's just a different, I had done a painting of this particular plant on a much smaller scale, and I really loved it, but it had a completely different background. And so this was an experiment with this way of putting the background in. And then to get another look at this one, you can see now here, I think I probably did have a large area of white underneath that caused that, but actually no, I see there's sort of a pink glow. So, you know, as I mixed my paint, I didn't worry about what the color, what the shape was next to it, if it was the right shade. And I just filled in as I went and took whatever happened in the end. And,
well, you know, I'd just like to add a comment there. What's going on for me, and I've looked at your work in your studio and elsewhere a lot, but I'm just discovering that your technique that you just described makes this an enormous kind of depth, like a window looking right on into the sky, the universe, the magical substance, you know, of creation. Then there's all this detailed foreground view that captures your attention. And you've gone ahead and painted more of the background on top of everything else with those added colors. So there's a wonderful effect on the brain and the eye from that. It's, I would say, stained glass window, but that's too conventional even for what's going on here. So I'll be right up to look at these in more detail. They're just, that's fascinating.
Well, thank you so much for that feedback, Claire. Appreciate it. Really sweet. And yes, I'd love to have you come up and see them in person. All right, anybody else? Ruby Lee, unmute yourself. Ruby, you need to unmute yourself.
So I'd like to know what medium you're using. What kind of paint are you using?
Oh, thank you for that question, Ruby. I am using acrylic paint right now. My studio is in my home, and before I used to live in Southern California in Long Beach, and I loved painting in oils, and I loved the creaminess of the paint, the way it moved on the surface. And but since I'm working at home, I felt that I should work with acrylic because it's not as fumey, but it's completely different. Mm-hmm. So I really had to learn how to work with it in ways that I enjoyed. And one of the ways is to actually thin the paint down to a fair degree so that I can get that transparency so that the color, you know, that's underneath can sing with the color that's on top. All right.
Is there time for one more question or no?
Yes, let me see, where are we at? Yeah, we have time.
Okay, I was curious about your moving back and forth from the representational branches into the abstracted, more abstracted, non-representational pieces. If they fed each other, or how does that work in your mind?
Let me see. Well, I don't know that it works in my mind other than I'm drawing with paint and I am, you know, playing with color. I wanted to experiment, explore what if I'm not using a visual reference, you know, whether it's actually being in nature and painting from nature or painting from a photograph, painting from life, if it's, you know, for a portrait. The experience, whether you're working from life or from a photo reference, is completely different. And then I haven't personally had a deep exploration into more abstract work, work coming from just, you know, with Claire, we like to work in improvisation. And so I think it's sort of like improvisational painting. And I just felt that compelled to at least give it a go. But I you know, it doesn't come easily for me or naturally. But I kind of, in my mind, I think that what's really needed is that I need to do it more until I start to develop, you know, a language of my own. So what I showed you today is sort of just the beginnings of that exploration.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we can take one more minute here, or we can go ahead and move on to our next artist. Oh, yes, Rob, you have a question.
Shelley, I really love your work. I love the surface, and it's clear that I could tell that they were painted on panels, and it makes it look so great and really unusual. I was wondering what your thought process was for changing the formats, because you changed at least 2 different sizes there behind you.
Well, you know, I really love, I love painting on a square shape. I can't explain exactly why, but I do love that format. And your regular rectangle, like you see here, is okay. But I actually really love the tall, narrow format. And I did quite a number of those in a much smaller scale. Well, the same size as this sort of tall rectangle, which could go this way, would be really cool too. But for the branches that I've been studying, you know, the upward tall length is really nice. And I also like the idea of, it's sort of like a little slice, you know, like a window. And this is what you get to see in that little slice. But I always like to try different shapes and see how that shape informs the composition. All right. Well, I think I will pass it on to, actually, I'm going to introduce our next artist. So how about that? Let me get back to gallery view so I make sure I don't miss anybody who might raise their hand. Okay. Everybody get ready for some really cool work by Pamela Blotner. Pamela Blotner is a Berkeley artist and curator whose sculptures and drawings reflect on humankind's relationship with nature, animals, calamity, and healing. Her early experiences as an artist for the Houston Zoo and her later work with Human Rights Watch, Physicians for Human Rights, Art for Conservation, and the Leatherback Trust continue to influence her aesthetic and practice. So please welcome everyone, Pamela Blotner.
Thank you. Thank you, Shelley, and thank you all for being here. And I'd like to start with saying that the themes that Shelley listed are very important, but one of my lifelong themes is duality, is what happens from one side to the other. And how it works one of the ways it works both in my studio and in my life is very serious work and comic work. The sense of humor, being able to laugh, I think is critical in navigating our way through life. And so if you look at any of the photographs that we all produced ahead of time, you will have seen a drawing of a crow tearing apart a book. Well, this is part of the same series, and I don't know how well you can see it, but it is called Black Swan Green, and it's all carved wood. I'm a woodworker, wood carver, and my assignment to myself was a series called Great Birds in Literature. So I will make any type of book or novel that has a bird at the heart of it. This novel has to do with a boy growing up in Cold War London and his perceptions of things. A wonderful book by David Mitchell, and it's called Black Swan Green, although there are no swans in the green at any point, but I recommend it, and this was great fun to make. Okay, in good company. What I've currently been doing is trying to bring together my carving, the woodworking, but also the painting that I began with. And I start with an image that I can borrow or that I can create and work from there. And I think that you probably get a better sense of the technique by starting with this one, although the one on the wall is the latest. This is called Fire and Ice, and there's no bird in it. It's a separate series that looks more at what's happening in the earth. And it's a photograph that I found in Japan. I regret to say that I did not take this photograph, but it was so beautifully graceful, and yet there is the background in our minds of global warming. So this is painting, and this time it was in gouache, and then I carved with small chisels the wood around it. So I share that with Shelley, that I like to paint on wood, and relatively small, but then I like to go back into the carving marks that I have made and add color to them. Put this on. Well, I think for the piece behind us, I'm going to have to pick up the computer and get you closer. But essentially, it's the same technique, and it happened when I was really impressed by a photograph that I saw of the destroyed land in Australia after their huge forest fires, and what was happening, that it lasted and lasted and lasted. But also I was impressed by the efforts, the repeated efforts to restore the land and to restore the continent. So I made a carved painting of a field that has been burned, but yet is being brought back from that area. The piece on the side, which is a pitchfork, comes from another series, but I borrowed it and incorporated with this one. And that series is based on tools and implements. That's close to a sculptor's heart, I think. being tactile and working with tools. And in this case, I like the fact that the tool grows out of the wood or grows out of the roots. And I wanted to talk about both recovering and replanting and tilling and working. So I carved the pitchfork and laminated it to a long root and then painted it. And let me bring you up a little bit closer so I don't trip over my swan. Let's see. So I think that here you may see a little bit of the detail. And this was, again, I began in gouache, and because I like to work on something that dries quickly. I do work on all paints, but I also came back in with pastel. Pastel I find really luscious and jewel-like with its, here's a little bit of dyslexia happening. Okay, very luscious and jewel-like. So I like to exploit that quality. There you go. I did use oil paint on this piece simply because wood, particularly old wood, dried wood, as you may know, it gets very hungry or very thirsty, and it needs whatever you can give it. And in this case, the oil feeds it rather than say acrylic. And finally, I'll show you a piece in progress, a new sculpture, or rather one that just keeps moving and changing. And that's something else that happens with my work, is that nothing seems ever to be finished. And I don't mind putting something away and working on it and working on it. And I've learned the hard way not to throw anything away, because very often I will throw something away and I'll see a photograph of it or a drawing and think, you know, that wasn't half bad. Why did I do that? So I hide things from myself and bring them back out. So this had to do with some of the same ideas. And I like to go for tool images and shapes that appeal to me. This is purely an aesthetic decision. This is an edger, a garden edger, and it's made of mahogany, and it's attached to another branch so that the two seem to be in collusion. It was inspired by a poem by Gary Snyder about a man making an axe handle out of a piece of wood, and the axe handle going back into a relationship with the wood. It's not quite successful. I think this little root is basically too small to carry off the idea, but it'll just live here until I get the right answer. So, all right, you think all that I have to share with you today, or I could keep sharing and you would never have your day back.
All right, Pamela. Yeah, I think we went over our time allotment a little bit, but it is time now. If anyone would like to give Pamela any feedback or ask any questions. And I see Ruby's hand. Go ahead, Ruby, unmute yourself.
I just love your work, especially the sculptures that use the root. A gorgeous concept. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, you never know if you're being cliche or if you're actually saying something new. So I very much appreciate that.
Thanks. It's beautiful work.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody else have a question for Pamela?
No personal questions?
Okay, we have Rob. Rob has a question.
Pamela, I really like your work. I was wondering if you've done any printmaking or like wood carving, for woodcuts in the past.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate that. And yes, actually I have. I'd love to do more wood carving. I'm sorry, woodcut is particularly interesting to me. I did some printmaking in school, but the idea of cutting into the wood and then having it be its own separate piece, the block, and then coming back and getting to print and change. I'd love to go back to it. I'm a little insecure, so I'm looking for a woodblock artist to look over that person's shoulder and learn something.
Pamela, we had a comment from Gwendolyn Meyer, and she says, I love your tools, Pamela. Would love to see an installation of many, thought-provoking.
Well, I thank you, Gwendolyn, very much. I keep making them, and I really would love to show them all together. I'm looking forward to that maybe happening one of these years.
One of the things I've noticed about your work that you didn't share today is your work with felting.
Right.
Is that something you're still doing?
I am, and it's again more duality, something completely different. And I know that I'm probably going over, but I do want to exploit your curiosity and just show you. Here's my collection of roots. If you can see them, and here is an unfinished felted wool piece. Two of them actually. So yes, I do felt, and I enjoy that as well.
All right. We have a comment from Claire Peasley. She says, and the painting media you have combined inventively appears to my innocent eyes as very original.
Thank you. Thank you for that. It's hard to say what's original and what, I mean, I think we're all crows. We all pick up things and bring them back to our nests. And that may be what I've done, but thank you.
All right. Any more feedback for Pamela? Or any other questions? All right. Well, it may be time, Pamela, to pass the baton.
Yes. And I must look like a puppeteer, always going below to see what's going on. Yes, it is my pleasure to introduce Ernesto Sanchez, who I've never met in person, but have met through this operation, and have walked by his studio in Point Reyes many times. But he's a Point Reyes based artist whose work is mixed media and multicultural, and it incorporates influences from his Southern California childhood and his Mexican-American upbringing. He's also made artistic studies in Asia and Indonesia, and spent 30 years performing, teaching, and collaborating with artists throughout the US, Latin America, Europe, and Asia. His goal is to create pieces that act as portals for the spirit and vehicles for personal discovery. Ernesto.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you very much for doing this particular event today. And hi, Ruby, I'm happy to see you there in this lineup. I started out as a mask maker. I started out as a mask maker and a mask dancer. And I didn't know when I got into masks, I didn't know that I would discover a thread that has gone through all my work ever since, is that energy. That the masks have the power to transform. They have the power to transform not only the viewer's perception of what they're seeing, but also the masked dancer has the potential to transform something mysterious into something tangible with their dance. It's a very unique and incredible power. And this is a mask that I made several years ago, many years ago, but I just brought it out to show you. that this mask is made of cast paper, and it's a mask I love. I want to take you into my studio and show you something. I will need slow, but I want to show you this piece here. This is an angel. It's called the Emergence of Spirits. I work with models. It's not a body cast. And when I did this piece, I told my model, we're going to make a short piece, a small piece. It turned out to be 7 feet tall. I was very surprised. It has elements of story. It has a lotus here at the bottom, the lotus coming out of the mud. It has a reptile there. Reptiles are all these symbols, mediums between this world and the underworld. It has the explosive nature of the crystal, and out of that is the emergence of the spirit. And there she is. This particular part of my studio, I actually call the Hall of Angels, because there's a lot of angels in here. And I really work with, as I mentioned earlier, discover the essence of energy and the uses of energy. So for me, the divine feminine, the presence of an angel, the presence of that nurturing spirit, that feminine nurturing spirit, to have that as an ally as I'm working is a beautiful energy. Here you can see the heart, which is very important in my art. Coming out of angels and working in this environment, I also got into making altars. And originally the altars were more something similar that you might see in Asia, the houses. But then I got into sculptural. And this particular one is also an emergence of spirit. She's bursting through the ethers. Her face is not fully formed. She's coming out and taking form in the physical. But inside is the womb and the life force of her spirit. And it's a glistening mosaic of mirrors. The glistening mosaic of mirrors. This particular piece is also sister to the Bellina Spirit House that's located in the center of town. And that particular spirit house, as other public art, continues that exploration of energy. Can you create a piece that's static in form, that doesn't move at all, and yet will resonate with the presence of life and spirit? Mentioning the mask, as I pan through here, I want to show you an ancestral piece. Now this piece, when I was sculpting this mask, was not the mask I intended to make. It was not the face, but this ancestor showed up, and I just went with it. I let this particular piece take life and form. It's a mosaic of stained glass, iridized stained glass. Following the shape and form of the mask, I've been working on for the last several years something I call Spirits of the Underworld. And this particular series of masks are very large, and I want to focus on one or two. This one is called I Was Raised Catholic. And it has that image of crosses just billowing above the head, that influence. And I have one more to share with you. And this one is another spirit from the underworld. When I say the spirits of the underworld, and I want to say two things. One is I'm not speaking in a religious sense when I use the word spirit. I'm speaking about the life force of the piece or the characterization of the piece. And this particular underworld is, I'm not basing it on any myths or stories from other cultures. It's my own experience of dealing in, journeys to the underworld, where not all is dark. Some people might think the underworld is a very dark and a brooding place, but actually I find it very stimulating. You might not see the horizon, but you're on a journey, an eternal journey. And for a piece that I've been working on, it's been giving me some problems. And I don't mind showing you a piece that's giving me problems. Let me turn this around again. Is this piece. And it has 5 eyes. And the color and shape and form of it has just been eluding me. I've been having a really hard time. I thought I had a breakthrough a couple of days ago, but I didn't. So at this point in time, I'm going to set this piece aside and let it just breathe, let it just be. So that is my, I don't know if I covered 5 minutes, but that's my little talk. And
yes, you did.
Did I do it in 5 minutes?
Let's open the floor. You did it, Ernesto. Let's open the floor for comments or questions. I mean, I'll start. I am really curious when you say that the piece is eluding you. What is it that you're particularly struggling with?
Good question. For me, the final frontier for me is painting. I have a really hard time with colors. I have a really hard time feeling comfortable. So I'm very tentative in that process of painting. There's a communication going on, as I spoke of earlier, this sense of spirit. And I really want to honor the essence, whatever the essence is of this particular spirit, whatever the essence is of this particular character, I really want to honor it. And so that dialogue that goes on between the piece and myself as I'm painting is very mysterious, and the piece is leading me. And so when the piece leads me in a place where I'm not happy, I don't feel it's quite right, then I have to set it aside. I can show you this angel that left me, and I had to put it on the wall for a year. For 1 year, it sat above my sofa. And I just could not figure out what its proper essence was. These are warrior angels. This particular angel just flew. I just made that so quickly. Everything I did on this angel just worked. And I thought, okay, great. I'll make another one. This one just really got away from me, right? I just was not happy. The angel's not happy. So I hung it on the wall, and it was there for a year. But I would look at it now and then. And then one day I caught a glimpse of it out of the corner of my eye. I saw its color, I saw its completion. I took it off the wall, and in a few days it was finished. But it's just, it's an organic process for me of the painting, of trying to capture the right spirit and essence in the piece.
Great. Yes, Claire.
Okay, I don't know if this is the kind of question that belongs in this forum, but Ernesto, I've known you for a while, and it continues to completely baffle me what a wide, deep, broad horizon there is to your imagination, and you're prolific. So there's this huge variety of subjects and images and impacts, and like you say, energies that seems to flow from you, even though an angel for a while had to hang in the ceiling and take her time. So my question for you is, what's your life like outside the studio? Are you able to turn off and on that open doorway to the mythic and imaginative world? What happens when you go grocery shopping, kind of thing? I don't understand you.
That's great. I mean, that's, you don't understand me. But that's a great question. First off, I can say I'll never turn off. I'm always, if I'm not in the studio, I spend a lot of time outside. I really love twilight, that transition from daylight into evening, nighttime. But during those moments in the twilight, there's something very magical outside in nature or wherever you are. So no, I don't think. I think I am where I am at all times. And grocery shopping is very interesting. I read Thich Nhat Hanh one time, and he said most people live in a 3-foot experience of life. Everything, their whole life is experiencing 3 feet around them. Whatever they're doing, it doesn't go beyond 3 feet. And so I thought about that, and I went, okay. And Technicon was saying, as far as you can see is yours. As far as your eye can see, the far vistas is your world. That's your world. So I see myself in grocery stores. I often look to see what I can see beyond the aisles and beyond, the displays, and look out the windows. And what can I see? And so waiting in lines, like at maybe Whole Foods down in Mill Valley, I can look out the windows and see the rolling hills of Marin. And I go, that's my world. Right now in this moment, I'm in the grocery store, I'm shopping, I'm doing this thing. But in truth, I'm still with nature. I'm still out in that beautiful vista. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Ernesto, I want to share with you some things that were put into the chat. We have a question from Gwendolyn Meyer. She says, your work references many cultures, Mexican, Asian, and also the imagination. Can you speak more about your influences and what you reference outside yourself, if any? Do you want me to share the other comment before you answer? The next is from Zoe Moss. She says, amazing, Ernesto. I noticed your masks as well as your latest female angel are in a larger phase. Do you have an idea why you're currently making larger pieces? Love them.
Thank you. I'll answer the first one first. Culturally speaking, the universality of art or the universality of spirit is not really bound by cultures. Every culture will have influences or styles, but ultimately, if in my view, they're all leading to a place of for the individual viewer to see and get a nice positive hit, a nice sense of beauty. Yes, I was born in, my father is from Mexico, my grandfather is from Spain. I have a lot of cultural, I grew up in Southern California. We speak about the melting pot, being around a lot of different cultures as a child. I went to the blue collar upbringing. The school I was in, the elementary school, was a lot of different nationalities. And there was the harmonious life. And I hear stories of people on the East Coast that would have to run to school and to not, get beat up by some gang because they were Jewish or something. And I didn't experience those things even as a Mexican in Southern California. So I had more of a freedom of outlook. And also growing up on the West Coast, there is a strong Asian influence. And I don't know why, that I just feel so comfortable and warm whenever I land in Asia. There's something about it. And as a mask maker, going and studying in Japan and Bali for years, there's a finesse, a very fine quality that they bring to the art. And they've always never just were making these things for the sense of beauty. They were making them so if they were to meet the god or the goddesses in their moment of dance or in their moment of ceremony, that they had the highest form possible imbued in the piece that they made. So there was they tried to reach this high level of energy to resonate with the gods and the stories of their myths. So I'm really happy that I'm able to flow. I also like the childlike quality, the innocent quality of life. And so I try to bring that kind of fun aspect into a lot of the pieces. So there is a weave that continually happens. And Zoe, thank you very much. The large spaces based on, I make masks. Masks are like this. The story around the mask it doesn't come alive until the dancer puts it on and tells a story. So when you see a mask like this, for some people, that's as far as they can see. So I started making faces like this, where there was more story. You could see like this piece here. It has a headdress. So the mask itself is a beautiful, kind of peaceful Buddha-like face. But then it has this beautiful headdress, which is beads and rhinestones. And now people could look at that and see the story. So if let me see another face. Excuse me. This face here is from the Underworld. And this face with all the nails and everything, it has a very strong, powerful look. And if it didn't have those nails, it would just be the face. So this particular story is enhanced by the ornamental nature. It's enhanced. This particular long face is very abstract in nature, but you can really still see character, and you can sort of see the explosion of something happening to this particular face. I'll show one more. So I hope that answered your question, Zoe. Thank you for watching from New York.
All right, Ernesto, we need to wrap it up, but we do have one more question. If you could answer quickly.
Briefly? Sure.
Yeah, Rob is interested in knowing what your medium is.
Thank you.
He heard that the first mask was cast paper, but what else?
I work in paper, I work in concrete, I work in cast concrete. These moons are all cast concrete. The papers, I work with mirrors in the Mosaic. I work with rhinestones. I love the rhinestones and the pieces. And so I work with a lot of different mediums. I make the paper myself, and I really got into making paper when I lived in Japan. And that's my brief answer, and I'd like to thank you all.
All right, thank you so much, Ernesto, for sharing your work with us. And once again, thank you all who showed up for our first inaugural event here of the Artist Exchange. For the rest of our time, we want to open the floor for sharing of any artist opportunities, resources. If you have something you'd like to share with the group, you can raise your hand and we'll call on you. And so share away. Yes, Pamela.
I'm jumping in because I want to make a plug for next month. I think it's going to be March 20th. We're going to have, one of the artists we're going to have is Robbie Adams. And he owns and runs and curates for the, Robbie Abrams, sorry, the Abrams Claghorn Gallery, where I've shown work for years. One of the thrusts of the galleries is to promote new artists and underrepresented artists. I'm neither one, but in any event, he's going to talk to us. He's going to show a little bit of his own work and talk about the tension between being a gallerist and an artist, and give you some tips on what gallerists look for in case you want to have a new venue for your work. We haven't yet decided what artist to pair him with, but we will announce that.
All right, thank you, Pamela. Yeah, I would like to share with everyone, of course, I work at Gallery Route 1, and I happen to know that Gallery Route 1 is seeking new artist members. So if you would be interested in being part of a nonprofit art gallery, and you like to roll up your sleeves and work hard, then come on and join Gallery Route 1. There's information on our website about how you can apply to become an artist member. All right, does anyone else have, you know, I'll ask a question I'll throw out a question to all the artists here. You know, as I was preparing for this, this event today, and I'm looking at my work, I noticed the dates on the work, and the last dates are really 2019. When 2020 came, the pandemic hit. I did one new piece, and that I installed actually in downtown Point Reyes. I made a mural on a piece of canvas, and then I just staple gunned it to the wall on the Grandy building. That was my response to the pandemic and just a lot of unrest in the world. And it was a classic tree with birds on the branches, and each bird had words in it and that said, care for yourself, care for others, care for the earth. And I just really felt compelled to make that piece. But since then, have just been really immersed in trying to keep the gallery going, and just recognize, wow, I haven't really been able to get in the studio. So wondering if anyone else has been struggling with getting in the studio, and if you have any tips for me on how I can approach these things in a little more effective way.
I'm going to jump in again if I can.
Okay, Pamela.
Oh, let Ernesto go first.
Well, I would just echo your thing. 2020 was such a weird way. I have my studio right here in Point Reyes Station. It's open to the public. I had to close the doors in early March, and I didn't come here for months. I basically, I don't know, you know, people go, you're an artist, you can just work by yourself. But I don't know what happened. I had a very hard time as an artist being creative in those early months. Even when I came back and said, okay, I'm going to start working, I walked into the studio, and it just, everything felt foreign. The art felt foreign. It was just very disconnected. And so lately I've been coming back a little more often. I don't know what the trick is. I guess just every day, plug away. But I think as things start opening up, maybe things will continue opening up for the artists in their studios. I don't know, but I had a hard time also. I've had 2020 weird year.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Ernesto. All right, I see Betsy down there waving her fingers. Betsy.
Yeah, thanks, Shelley. I have 2 words. Trust yourself. That's it. You'll be okay. You'll do it. Just trust yourself. That's it.
Okay, Betsy, I will work on that.
Hey,
All
I'd
right.
like to piggyback on both Betsy and Ernesto by saying, first of all, set some time aside for yourself. You work so hard for GRO and are such a pivotal character in everything that happens there. You're going to have to do what Ernesto does at some point: close your studio door, and and leave a sign that says "Gone fishing." But I agree with Ernesto, especially. It is hard to get started, even in the best of times. So maybe just don't put pressure on yourself. Just make something, leave something there, and something you can come back to and think about, no pressure.
That sounds great. Oh yes, Ruby, you wanted to say something.
Well,
unmute.
My experience is totally opposite, because I'm down in LA. I'm locked down here, my home in Marin, but all my paints and everything are up north. So I had to do something. And especially in this pandemic, when everybody's anxiety levels were up to drowning everyone almost. So my work was to create these bodhisattvic sculptures that were really uplifting. And while I was doing it, the process gave me that rise too, and to create something beautiful, peaceful, and calm that people can share and experience for a moment, that will take them out of that despair of the pandemic and everything that was happening in the world events. So.
All right, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. That was really nice. Well, I think we've kind of hit an hour.